Good morning, everyone. Boker Tov. In this week's Torah portion, we have the story of Joseph, who's sold into slavery by his brothers after being thrown into the pit. And then within slavery in Egypt, he's accused of a crime falsely, and he's thrown into prison. And there in prison, he meets the butler and the baker. And he interprets their dreams, and he tells the baker that unfortunately in 3 days from now, you are going to be hanged by Pharaoh. But he says to the butler, in 3 days, your dream means you will be released and you will be restored to your position, to your post of being the cupbearer of Pharaoh. And then, at the end of the Torah portion, Joseph says to the butler, do me a favor. When you get to Pharaoh, when you're restored to your high position, remember me and tell Pharaoh that I'm an innocent person accused falsely, sitting in prison now for 10 years, and ask him to release me. And the closing verse of this week's Torah portion is how the butler is released, but velo zachar et Yosef, that the cupbearer, Sar HaMashkim, did not remember Joseph. Vayishkachehu, he forgot all about him. And it's only 2 years later, when Pharaoh has his dreams, that he tells Pharaoh about the Jew in prison who knows how to interpret dreams. And the question is, we all forget things, but usually we forget minor things. We don't forget major events in our life. Here, the butler's in prison. He has a dream. He's looking sad. Joseph approaches him and says, what's bothering you? Interprets his dream, tells him the best news of his life, that he's going to go free in 3 days. And the butler forgets about something so significant, so monumental, such an amazing story in his life. How could he forget this story? And clearly the answer is that when the Torah says the word zachor, remember, it's not a mental exercise. It means remember and act on what you're remembering. In the Ten Commandments, it says remember the day of Shabbat. Doesn't just mean you should make a mental note that today is Shabbat. It means you should treat it as a holy day. Make kiddush, gather your family, say the hamotzi, go to the synagogue, refrain from work. It's remembrance that leads to action. In the Shema we say you should wear the tzitzis, the fringes on your garment, and remember the commandments. And then right after that it says, and perform them. It's not just to remember the commandments, to do the commandments, to observe them, to obey them. The same thing is when it talks about Amalek. The Torah says, remember Amalek, what they did to you. Anti-Semitism, the hate of our enemies in every generation. It doesn't just mean to remember Zachor. It means Timche, wipe out, destroy Amalek. And therefore, of course, the butler remembered Joseph. But he did nothing on his behalf. And that's what the Torah says. He didn't remember, he didn't act on what he remembered. Every Jew will never forget October 7th. But it's not about remembering October 7th. It's about remembering the lesson of October 7th. The lesson that we Jews have to love each other and be united. The lesson that we have to rise up against our enemies. And it's thanks to the IDF that didn't just remember October 7th, but acted to destroy Hamas and Syria and Lebanon and Hezbollah and Iran, to act on this remembrance of Amalek in every generation. That's why we're now in the position we're in now, 14 months later. And while there's great prayers and enthusiasm and hope and optimism, and we have to intensify our prayers that the hostages may come home very soon. With God's help, we have to plead with God that this should be the breakthrough right before Hanukkah. We should see a miracle. The hostages should light the menorah with their families. What a Hanukkah miracle it would be. But it's because of those who never stopped fighting for the hostages, didn't just remember the hostages. It's for the families who acted every day to influence others, to bring about their freedom. Last night I was at the AJC dinner. They were giving out these pins, the hostage pins. The reason we wear these pins is not to remind others, to remind ourselves to act every day to help these families, to help Israel in its fight. It's to remember and do and act on behalf of the Jewish people. Not just to remember and say, "Oy, it's terrible," but to do something positive to help one another. There's a mother who lives in New York. Her son became a lone soldier. Her name is Hadassah Milner. And her son made Aliyah. He loved Israel. He went to serve in the IDF. When October 7th broke out, he didn't wait for a Tzav Shmoneh to be ordered to come back. He put on his uniform and he went to fight in Gaza. But unfortunately, he saw so much tragedy that he started to suffer from PTSD. and his commander said, you need to go home and work out. You're struggling, you're having a hard time. Go home and get the help you need. And the mother describes how he goes back to his apartment, his empty apartment, all alone. And she says his son Aryeh Milner calls her in New York, and she sees his pain and she cries for him because she's not there to help him. She says other soldiers come home if they have PTSD, they have a family to embrace them. She says, who's cooking for him? Who's feeding him? Who's making sure he's going to his doctor's appointments? Who's taking him? He's all alone. And so she wrote an article how painful it is to watch her son suffer with PTSD from a distance. Suddenly she started getting flooded with emails. People in Israel said, I want to take care of him. I want to take him to his appointments. I want to cook for him. I want to look after him. And then someone in Israel wrote to her and said, I want to pay for your ticket to come to Israel to spend time with him. And so she flew to Israel to spend a week with her son. And she talks about how she got to just hug him and kiss him and embrace him and feed him and cook for him and sit on the couch with him and talk to him and take him to his appointments. And then someone else offered to give them a vacation in a beautiful, quiet resort in Haifa so they could get away for a few days and just relax. And she talked about the love that she felt in Israel from all of Aryeh's friends and from the Jewish people everywhere who supported her. And then she says that she decided to have a dinner for all of Aryeh's friends. And so she invited everyone and she cooked this beautiful dinner in his apartment for them to come and spend the day, an evening with him. And one of the friends said, what could I bring? And she said, if you want, you could stop and pick up some pastries. And she said the friend went into the makola, to the grocery store, and ordered a lot of different pastries. And when the two girls, the cashiers behind the counter, saw, said, what is this? You having a picnic with your family? And he said, no, I told him the story. He told him the story about his friend Aryeh who has PTSD, and the mother flew in to be with her son. She's making a dinner for all of his friends, and I'm picking up some pastries. When the two girls heard this, they immediately put together a beautiful kier basket with chocolates and wine and candy and treats and sweets, and packaged up this beautiful kier package. And say, here, take this to your friend Aryeh. And they wrote a note, Am Yisrael Chai, wishing you a refuah shalema with love, and signed their names, these two random girls who never met him. This is the story of remembering one another, of acting on one another. And with this attitude, we have and we will continue to prevail. Zachor, remember, but don't just remember, act on what you're remembering. Have a wonderful day.